There are things we prefer to forget, but the past has a cruel way of reminding us of what hurts the most. For years, I've kept this story inside me, but now I feel it's time to share. If just one woman hears this and finds the strength to change her life, then my pain will have been worth it. My name is Celia. I'm 76 years old, and I've been carrying a story I've never told anyone. In truth, I always wanted to believe that everything was left behind, that life moved on, that the girl I once was no longer exists. But certain memories insist on returning, as if they want to remind me of who I am and what I survived. Before I begin, tell me where you're watching this story from. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and like this video. It makes me so happy to connect with you all. I was born in 1949 in a small town in Ohio. Our house was simple, made of wood, with a large backyard where my mother planted lettuce, cabbage, and herbs she used to make tea. I grew up playing in the dirt yard, running barefoot without worrying about anything except the sound of the church bell announcing lunchtime. My mother, Louise, was a strong but very quiet woman. A widow, she worked all day as a seamstress to support us. I don't remember my father. He died young in a road accident when I was still a baby. At least that's what my mother told me. He didn't feel like a loss to me. My mother and I were enough for each other. Until he appeared. I was 8 years old when my mother started talking about a man she had met. At first, I didn't pay much attention, but gradually I noticed that she spoke of him differently. Sometimes she would get embarrassed, smile to herself as if she were feeling young again. "Anthony is a very decent man, Celia. He can help us so much," she would say. I didn't understand exactly what she meant, but over time I realized she was referring to marriage. Mom was happy, and I wanted to believe this was a good thing. But from the first time I saw him, I felt a chill in my stomach. He arrived at our house smelling strongly of cigarettes, with a worn hat on his head. He was a tall, thin man with a serious face. His handshake was dry, and when he looked into my eyes for the first time, I felt a strange shiver, the kind that makes you want to run away. I didn't know anything about him except what my mother told me, that he was a hard-working man, that he had been married before, that he had come from the city to try life in our small town. But I instinctively knew something was wrong. In the first few days, he showed himself to be helpful. He fixed the backyard fence, helped my mother organize the house, but he always observed me in silence. At first, I thought it was just in my head, but soon I realized that it wasn't normal. As the months passed, our house changed. Before, my mother would always laugh at my games. Even when tired, she would sit on the edge of the bed to listen to my made-up stories. Now she was always tense, busy, worried about every detail of the house. "Don't leave your toys scattered around, Celia. Anthony doesn't like mess," she would say. "Speak more quietly, girl. He's resting," she would frequently repeat. Little by little, my home became a place where I had to walk on eggshells. I had to measure my words, watch my tone of voice, be careful even with how I walked across the living room. And then came the first signs. At first, it was just looks, then accidental bumps, small gestures that would seem trivial to anyone watching from outside, but that increasingly frightened me. And the worst part was that my mother saw it. She noticed, but pretended nothing was happening. I didn't understand why she remained silent. Perhaps because, in those times, a lone woman didn't have many choices. Perhaps because she believed it was better to endure certain things than to live without a man in the house. Once I gathered the courage to try to tell her that I felt uncomfortable with some of his behaviors. But before I could say anything, she held my face and looked into my eyes with a heavy gaze. "Don't talk nonsense, my daughter. He's our only support. Do you want us to go hungry?" I swallowed my words. After that day, I understood that speaking up was pointless, that I was alone. And that's when the worst period of my life began. The worst pain isn't the one you feel in your body. It's the pain of silence, of abandonment, of the certainty that no one will help you. It's carrying an invisible weight day after day with no hope of relief. But back then, I was just a girl, and girls didn't have a voice. After that conversation with my mother, I realized I was alone. I could scream, cry, beg. Nothing would change. She had already made her choice. From that day on, my house stopped being a home. If I felt some comfort there before, now all I saw were walls that surrounded me and a roof that imprisoned me. My own body seemed to no longer belong to me. I wanted to believe I was overreacting, but every look he gave me, every moment my mother left and he stayed alone with me, made my heart pound hard. Not from joy, but from dread. My routine changed drastically. Before, I could play in the yard until the sun started to set. Now, I avoided leaving the house, because I knew that when I returned, he would be there, sitting in the rocking chair, watching, waiting. At school, my friends talked about silly things, about the dolls they wanted to get, about the cartoons they watched on a neighbor's television. I remained quiet. It seemed we lived in different worlds. They didn't have to carry such a heavy secret. I started sleeping less, staying awake late, listening to his footsteps through the house, hoping my mother would always stay nearby. But many times, she went to bed earlier, leaving me alone in the living room with him. One night, I tried to lock my bedroom door. My heart was pounding. I knew he sensed my fear. When I heard the footsteps approaching, I held my breath. He turned the doorknob. I closed my eyes. Nothing happened. He laughed softly from the other side of the door, a laugh that sent chills from my feet to my head. Then he left, but I knew it wouldn't be forever. It was just a matter of time. My mother wasn't a stupid woman. She knew. Deep down, she knew. But she pretended not to see. She became a different person, always nervous, always anxious, spending more time cleaning the house than resting. She kept saying she needed to keep everything in order so he wouldn't get angry. And I had to obey too. Celia, don't make him angry, you hear? Don't talk back, girl. Don't make up stories. It was then that I understood my mother was afraid of him. She didn't want to see what was happening, because if she saw it, she would have to do something, and she didn't know what to do. Her silence was killing me slowly. I needed someone to say, I'm here. I'll protect you. But no one did. In the 1950s, nobody talked about these things. If a woman suffered inside her home, all she could do was lower her head and continue living. If a child felt uncomfortable about something, they were told it was imagination. I thought about telling my teacher, but how would I say it? What if she didn't believe me? What if she told my mother? The neighbors always came to our house for coffee. I heard them saying my mother was lucky to have found a man who helped her. Lucky. If I said something, would they call me ungrateful? Fear silenced me. Once he grabbed my arm forcefully. No one was nearby. I held my breath and tried not to cry. When he finally let go, I felt the mark of his fingers on my skin. My mother saw it. And what did she do? She lowered her eyes and continued stirring the spoon in the pot as if nothing had happened. It was at that moment that my heart truly broke. There, I knew that no matter how much I wanted it, no one would come to save me. If I wanted to escape that hell, I would have to do it myself. They say a mother's love is the strongest that exists. But what about when that love isn't enough to protect? When the person who should defend you the most chooses silence? I spent years trying to understand, trying to forgive, but some pains never completely disappear. When I was a child, I used to believe my mother could solve anything. If I fell and hurt my knee, she knew exactly how to make the pain go away. If I was afraid of the dark, she hugged me until I fell asleep. But one day, I realized I could no longer count on her. I wanted to believe my mother didn't see what was happening, but that illusion didn't last long. I began to notice the small signs. When I came close to her, hoping to find safety, she would avert her gaze. Sometimes, after something he did, I would wait, hoping she would say something, but she never did. At times, her eyes would be red, as if she had been crying silently, as if she felt guilty. But guilt isn't enough. Once, when I was in the kitchen, he came up behind me and put his hand on my shoulder. It was quick, but it made me freeze inside. My mother saw it. She was washing dishes. For a second, I thought she would finally react, but all she did was squeeze her eyes shut, take a deep breath, and continue scrubbing the plate as if it were nothing. It was at that moment I understood my pain didn't matter. I tried several times to give some signal, to ask for help, but every time I tried to say something, my mother cut me off. That's nonsense, Celia. Don't make up stories. You must have misunderstood. No, I hadn't misunderstood. and she knew it. Over time, I realized my mother was also a prisoner, but her prison was different from mine. She was afraid of living alone. In America of that era, a woman without a husband was seen as a burden. A woman alone was despised, condemned to live on the margins. And my mother didn't want that for herself. So instead of protecting her daughter, she chose to maintain the marriage, chose to pretend everything was fine, that nothing was happening. Perhaps deep down, she believed it was better for me to go through that than for both of us to live in poverty. But there is no justification for a mother's omission. One night, I woke up to a noise in the living room. It was him, walking around the house. My mother wasn't there. I knew she had gone to bed early. My heart raced. I remained completely still in bed, praying he wouldn't come to my room. That's when I heard the door open slowly. My entire body went cold. I closed my eyes tightly. If I stayed still, maybe he would leave. But suddenly, a noise echoed through the house. My mother turned on the light. I will never forget that moment. Me, curled up in bed, him, standing in the middle of the room, and my mother at the door, looking at the scene. It was the first time I saw fear in her eyes. For a moment, I thought, she's going to do something now. She's finally going to defend me. But no, she just bowed her head and said with a trembling voice, "Anthony, come to bed." And he left my room as if nothing had happened. It was then that I understood my mother not only knew, but chose to ignore it. After that, something inside me broke. If my own mother wouldn't protect me, no one else would. If she preferred to pretend nothing was happening, then I would pretend too. But something inside me had already changed. I wasn't the same girl anymore. I started counting the days. I didn't know where I would go or how I would do it, but I knew that sooner or later I would have to run away. My mother had abandoned me in silence, but I wouldn't let that define my life forever. There's a type of fear you feel for a moment, and then it passes. But there's another type, the one that sticks to you, that makes your heart tighten every time you hear a different noise. I grew up learning to live with it, until one day I realized that if I didn't do something, it would swallow me forever. After the night my mother chose to close her eyes, something inside me went out. I no longer expected anything from her. I understood I was alone, and when you understand that, you learn to protect yourself in other ways. If before I tried to maintain hope, now all I wanted was to survive. From that day on, my house became a minefield. Every step I took had to be calculated. I knew that at any moment I could be caught by surprise. Avoiding him became my daily mission. If I heard his footsteps in the house, I pretended to be busy in another room. If my mother left, and I knew I would be alone with him, I made up excuses to go to the neighbor's house, anything to avoid being vulnerable. But it wasn't just his presence that haunted me. It was my mother's silence. It was looking at her and seeing that she knew exactly what was happening and yet chose to ignore it. It was seeing that even when my eyes begged for help, all she did was lower her head. And that killed me a little more each day. If during the day I could hide, at night I had nowhere to run. I slept curled up, afraid of any noise. Each minimal sound made me hold my breath. The bedroom door was no longer just a door. It became a fragile boundary between my dread and real danger. Each night I prayed, asking that he wouldn't come, asking that my mother would wake up, asking above all for God to take me out of that house. But God didn't come, and I knew that if I wanted to escape, I would have to find a way out on my own. I was 12 when I tried to escape for the first time. That night, my mother had gone to help a sick neighbor. I was left alone with him. My heart hammered in my chest. I knew it was just a matter of time before he appeared at my bedroom door, and that's what happened. I heard the footsteps, then the creaking of the wood. But before he could open the door, I ran. I went out through the bedroom window and ran barefoot across the yard. My only thought was to reach the neighbor's house and ask for help. But I didn't make it. He caught up with me before I could. He grabbed me by the arm forcefully and dragged me back. That night, I understood that it wasn't enough just to run away. I needed to have a plan. And more than that, I needed to have courage. After that failed attempt, my life changed even more. At school, I no longer talked to anyone. Before, I would at least try to play, smile, pretend my life was normal. But now I couldn't anymore. My teachers began to notice something was wrong. "You've been very quiet, Celia. Is everything okay at home?" I always answered yes, but the truth was that nothing was okay and never would be as long as I stayed there. One afternoon, I came home from school and found my mother crying in the kitchen. For a second, my heart raced. She finally saw what was happening, I thought. But no. She was crying because she discovered he had another woman. The scene was almost comical. My mother falling apart over a man who had destroyed our lives. But for me, it was a sign. If even she was suffering now, then there was nothing left to hold me there. I knew that if I wanted to have a future, I needed to find my own way out. And it was on that day that I began to plan my real escape. There are moments in life when you need to choose between staying and dying inside or leaving and risking everything. I had nothing more to lose. My only option was to run away. But run where? How? And what if they caught me again? These questions haunted me every night. But one thing I already knew. I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life in that house. I no longer slept. I spent nights awake thinking about how to leave that house without being caught again. My first escape attempt at 12 had failed miserably. After that day, he became even more vigilant. My mother became even more silent, and I felt even more alone. But even so, I didn't give up. Now at 15, I wasn't the same girl anymore. I had understood that if I wanted to escape, it wasn't enough to run in the middle of the night without direction. I needed a plan. My first concern was money. I didn't have a penny to my name. I couldn't simply leave and hope that people's kindness would save me. I needed to ensure that when I ran away, I would have at least the minimum to survive until I found work. I started collecting coins. Whenever my mother went to the market and left change on the table, I would take some. When she sent me to buy bread and there was change left over, I would hide it. Each coin I took was a step closer to my freedom. Another thing I needed to ensure was a place to go. I couldn't just run out aimlessly like the last time. I needed a destination. That's when I remembered Aunt Beth, my mother's older sister. She lived in another city, and when I was little, I used to spend a few days there during vacations. I hadn't seen her in years, but I remembered she was different from my mother. She was a strong woman who didn't take nonsense from anyone. Maybe, just maybe, she would help me. Now I had a plan. I would collect money, wait for the right moment, and take the first bus that would take me to Aunt Beth's city. But the hardest part was missing, the right moment to escape. I waited for months. Whenever I thought it was the right time, something made me pull back. He was too alert, my mother stayed home, or I simply froze with fear. But then fate did its part. One night, he came home drunker than usual. He cursed at my mother, threw things on the floor, said he couldn't stand that house anymore. My mother cried silently, as she always did. I curled up in the corner of the kitchen, hoping he wouldn't even remember I existed. That's when he shouted, "I'm going to spend the night out." He grabbed his car keys and left, slamming the door. I knew at that moment that this was my chance. I waited for my mother to go to her room. I waited for silence to take over the house. When I was sure she was asleep, I went to the kitchen, took the money I had managed to hide over the months, and stuffed it in my dress pocket. My heart was beating so hard, I thought she would wake up just from hearing the sound of my breathing. I went to the front door. The latch always made noise, so I opened it with maximum care. The cold night air hit my face. I was free. But I couldn't celebrate yet. I still needed to get to the bus station. I left barefoot, carrying only a small bag with a change of clothes and the little money I had. The bus station was more than an hour's walk away, but I couldn't stop. The faster I got there, the less chance there was of him finding me. I walked through the empty streets, looking back every minute, afraid he would appear at any moment. Every sound made me freeze, a dog barking, a car passing, the wind shaking the trees. I no longer knew what was real fear and what was my mind playing tricks on me. When I finally spotted the bus station, I felt my legs weaken. I had made it. But the hardest part was still to come. Buying the ticket and leaving before anyone noticed I shouldn't be there. I approached the counter with trembling hands. "I want a ticket to my aunt's city," I murmured, trying to seem calm. The attendant looked me up and down suspiciously. "Are you alone, little girl? My father is already there. He asked me to go ahead," I lied. He sighed and handed me the ticket. I held the paper so tightly my fingers hurt. It was my pass to freedom. Now I just had to wait. But while I was sitting on the bench, looking around, a fear took hold of me. What if he came after me? What if my mother woke up and noticed I was gone? What if— My thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the loudspeaker. "Attention, passengers of the bus to—" It was my bus. I got up so quickly I almost tripped over my own feet. I climbed the steps with a racing heart and sat in the last seat, curling up. The doors closed. The engine roared. When the bus started to move, tears ran down my face without me noticing. I didn't know what awaited me. I didn't know if my aunt would take me in. I didn't know anything, but I knew one thing. I would never go back to that house. I thought running away meant freedom. But the truth is that the hardest part was still to come. When the bus started to move away from the station, I realized I hadn't just left my house behind. I had left everything I knew. Now I was alone in the world, and that scared me more than anything else. The city lights were fading as the bus gained speed on the road. I looked through the window, watching the houses grow smaller on the horizon, and wondered if my mother had already noticed my absence. Would she look for me? Or deep down, had she been expecting this all along? I always thought that the moment I escaped that house, I would feel relief. But what overwhelmed me was fear. For the first time, I was truly alone. There was no one to hold me if I fell, no one to protect me or betray me. I felt cold even though I was wearing a thin jacket I had grabbed before leaving. My stomach hurt from hunger, but I didn't have the courage to spend the little money I had. Every penny would be essential until I found my aunt. I looked around the bus. There were few people traveling at that hour. An old lady dozing in the front seat, a man with a hat reading a folded newspaper, and there was a young man who kept staring at me from across the aisle. I lowered my head, trying to make myself invisible. As the hours passed, I began to think of the possibilities. What if he discovered I had run away? What if he came after me? I knew I hadn't told anyone about my plan, but what if my mother talked? What if he made a scene? Would the police come looking for me? I didn't know what to do if someone got on that bus asking for a girl alone. The thought left me frozen. I looked at the door, trying to calculate if I could run out if needed. But where would I go? The highway was dark, and I had no idea where we were. All I could do was stay there, hoping to reach my destination soon. At one point, the young man who was watching me got up and came to my seat. My heart raced. "Where are you going?" he asked with a smile that didn't please me. I didn't respond immediately. My body went rigid. He sat next to me uninvited. "Running away from home, aren't you?" I swallowed hard. He had noticed. If I admitted it, he could tell someone. But if I denied it, he might continue bothering me. "My dad is waiting for me in the next town," I lied, trying to sound confident. He smiled as if he knew I was making it up. "I know your father." He laughed softly and shook his head. I curled up even more against the window, feeling a fear I knew all too well. But at that instant, something unexpected happened. The old lady who had been dozing in the front seat stirred and looked at me. "Is everything okay, my child?" Her voice was firm, as if she already knew the answer. The young man looked at her and gave a forced smile. "I was just talking to the young lady." "Then you can go back to your seat because she doesn't want to talk." He hesitated for a moment, but then got up and returned to his seat. The old lady looked at me for a few seconds. "Are you traveling alone?" I wanted to say yes, that I was running away, that I didn't know where to go, but my instinct still screamed at me not to trust anyone, so I just shook my head in denial. She looked at me as if she knew I was lying, but she didn't insist. She just sighed and closed her eyes again. But for some reason, I felt a little safer. The bus continued its journey, and I tried to calm down. I closed my eyes but couldn't sleep. My mind was tired, my body exhausted, but the adrenaline kept me awake. After a few hours, I heard the driver announce the next stop. I was alert. My destination city was close, and I needed to get off at the right point. But the problem was that in the confusion of fear and anxiety, I made a mistake. I got off at the wrong place. As soon as the bus left, I realized my error. The name of the city wasn't the same as I remembered, and at that instant, despair took hold of me. I was lost. I didn't know where I was. I had nowhere to go, and now the little money I had might not be enough for another ticket. The feeling of panic grew inside me. I wanted to cry, but I had already learned that crying solved nothing. I needed to find a way out of there. But alone and with no one to help me, what could I do? Running away isn't the end of problems. It's just the beginning of a new type of battle. I thought that leaving that house would make everything easier. But life likes to test us, and I learned in the worst way that being free doesn't mean being safe. I was in the wrong city. The bus had already left when I realized my mistake. My eyes scanned the bus station, looking for some sign, some indication of where I was. My plan was to go to Aunt Beth's house, but now I didn't even know where I was. Fear began to take hold of my body again. The money I had was little. Would it be enough to buy another ticket? Would I be able to find a way to reach my destination before it was too late? But before I could make any decision, another concern arose. Where would I spend the night? It was late. The bus station was almost empty except for a few people who seemed as lost as I was. My legs were tired, my head ached, and my stomach churned with hunger. But the fear was greater than all of this. I knew I couldn't stay there for long. It was just a matter of time before someone started asking questions. I needed a plan. I looked around and saw a wooden bench a bit away. I sat there, hugging my own body, trying to appear invisible. The hours passed slowly. The cold wind cut my skin, and the hunger only increased. With each noise I heard, my heart raced. Every time a man passed too close, I held my breath and looked down, hoping no one would notice me. It was as if I had gone back to that time inside the house when I tried to be invisible to avoid drawing attention. But now I was outside, and the world out there was no safer than the house I had left behind. I was nearly falling asleep sitting when I felt a hand touching my shoulder. My entire body stiffened. I turned my face slowly, heart pounding. It was an elderly woman with wrinkled skin and tired eyes. She wore a scarf on her head and held a cloth bag. "Are you alone, girl?" I didn't know what to answer. Part of me wanted to lie, to say I was waiting for someone. But another part knew that this might be my only chance for help. "I'm going to my aunt's house," I murmured. She looked me up and down and frowned. "Alone at this hour?" I didn't answer. She sighed and, without asking anything else, extended the bag to me. "Eat." Inside was a piece of bread and some cheese. My stomach growled immediately. I took the bread with hesitation. "You can eat, girl. I won't hurt you." My eyes filled with tears. After so long feeling afraid of people, it was hard to believe that someone wanted to help me without asking for anything in return. I bit the bread hastily, tasting its simple flavor, which at that moment seemed like the best thing in the world. Mrs. Mary, that's how she introduced herself, lived near the bus station and worked as a cleaner at a cheap hotel downtown. After a while in silence, she said something that surprised me. "If you need a place to spend the night, I know a safe place." I didn't know if I could trust her, but I knew I had no choice. Mrs. Mary took me to a small storage room at the back of the hotel where she worked. It was nothing more than a cramped space with some boxes and an old mattress thrown in the corner. "You can sleep here tonight," she said. "But tomorrow morning you'll have to decide where to go." I nodded, holding back tears. As soon as she left, I sat on the mattress and looked around. It wasn't comfortable. It wasn't a home. But for the first time since I left home, I felt protected. I didn't know what my future would be, but I knew I had taken an important step. I had managed to escape, and now all I needed was to figure out how to start over. Starting from scratch isn't easy, but when you've spent your entire life in fear, any small achievement becomes a huge victory. That was the first time I felt that maybe I could have a different future. That morning, I woke up before the sun rose. My body ached from the thin mattress and the cold of the previous night. But I was alive. I spent a few minutes looking at the dark ceiling, trying to absorb everything that had happened. I had really escaped. It was no longer a plan, no longer an idea. It was real. But now came the hardest part: surviving alone. My biggest concern was still being found. I constantly looked around, afraid of seeing his face appearing in the middle of the crowd. Had my mother noticed I was gone? Was he looking for me? I didn't know, but just the idea of going back to that house made me freeze inside. If he found me, I knew I would never have another chance. I needed to find a way to move forward. Mrs. Mary appeared in the storage room shortly after dawn. She carried a cup of coffee and a piece of cake. "Eat this, girl. You'll need strength." I took the food with gratitude, feeling my stomach growl with hunger. While I ate, she looked at me with a mix of curiosity and concern. "You need work, don't you?" I nodded quickly. She remained silent for a moment, as if calculating something in her head. "The hotel needs someone to wash dishes. It's not much, but it pays for lunch and maybe a coin or two." My eyes lit up. It was little, but for someone who had never had anything, it was enough. "I accept," I responded immediately. The hotel wasn't luxurious, quite the opposite. It was one of those cheap places that housed travelers passing through and workers who had nowhere to go. The owner, Mr. Robert, was a quiet and practical man. When Mrs. Mary explained that I needed work, he just looked me up and down and shrugged. "You can start now." And so, without much notice, I began my first work experience. I spent the entire day in the kitchen washing dishes, glasses, and pots. My hands turned red from the hot water and soap, but I didn't complain. With each clean dish, I felt a small victory. For the first time in my life, I was working for myself. It wasn't for my mother, it wasn't to please anyone. It was for me. At the end of the day, Mr. Robert called me to the side. "Take this." In the palm of his hand were 3 coins. It wasn't much, but to me, it was as if I were holding a treasure. I hugged those coins against my chest and thanked him. "Tomorrow, if you want, you can come back," he said before leaving. I left the kitchen with a small but genuine smile. I had survived another day. I had a job. I had hope. When I returned to the storage room, Mrs. Mary was waiting for me, sitting on a crate. She smiled when she saw my tired but relieved face. "Did you enjoy working?" I nodded. She looked at me for a moment, as if thinking about something important. "You're strong, girl. Stronger than many people out there." Those words hit me in a way I didn't expect. I had never felt strong. I had always been the frightened girl, the one who tried to hide, the one who lived in silence. But for the first time, I realized I had done something that many people never managed. I had escaped. I had survived. And for the first time in a long time, I fell asleep without fear. I spent my whole life waiting for someone to save me, waiting for my mother to protect me, waiting for someone to notice my pain. But in the end, I understood that the only person who could change my story was myself. And I did. That morning, I woke up before the sun rose, as I had been doing since I started working at the hotel. The thin mattress where I slept in the storage room wasn't comfortable, but it was mine. For the first time, that small space didn't seem like a hiding place. It was my new life. There was still fear inside me. I still looked around in the streets. I still avoided certain glances. But there was a difference. Now I had a purpose. Now I had a future. The days passed, and little by little, things started to improve. I continued washing dishes at the hotel, but I began to learn other things. Mrs. Mary taught me how to make up the rooms, fold the sheets, and even how to deal with customers. The money was still little, but I saved every penny. My goal was one, to get my own place. I didn't want to depend on anyone ever again, and each day I felt that dream was closer. But no matter how much I was rebuilding my life, fear never completely left me. Every time I saw a man who looked like him, my body froze. Every time someone asked about my family, my throat closed. I didn't want to remember, but the past always finds a way to return, and it returned in a way I didn't expect. One afternoon, after a tiring day at the hotel, Mrs. Mary called me. "There's something for you." She was holding an envelope. My heart raced when I recognized the handwriting. It was from my mother. My hands trembled as I opened the letter. "Celia, my daughter, I've spent days looking for any information about you, my love. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me, but I needed to write. After you ran away, everything fell apart. He blamed me, humiliated me, and then he left. Now I'm alone. I know I was wrong. I know I abandoned you when you needed me most, but I wanted you to know that I miss you every day. I hope you're well. Your mother." My eyes filled with tears. She finally admitted it. She knew. She always knew. But now it was too late. The girl she had abandoned no longer existed. Mrs. Mary noticed my expression and sat beside me. "What are you going to do?" I took a deep breath, holding the letter tightly. I could write back. I could say everything I had kept inside me for years. I could throw all that weight out, but at that moment, I understood I no longer needed this. I didn't need an apology. I didn't need an explanation. My mother had made her choice in the past, and now I was making mine. Folding the paper slowly, I stood up and threw the letter in the trash. "Nothing," I replied. I no longer needed to carry that pain. The past would no longer define my future. Months later, with the money I had saved, I managed to rent a small room for myself. It was small, simple, but mine. On the day I entered that empty space, I held back tears. I had done it. I had survived. And more than that, I had freed myself. That small room became the foundation of my new life. I continued working at the hotel, and Mr. Robert eventually promoted me to the front desk. I was good with numbers and even better with people, something I never knew about myself until I had the chance to discover who I really was. Years passed. I studied at night school, earned my high school diploma, and later took bookkeeping classes at the community college. By my early 20s, I was managing the entire hotel. By 30, I had saved enough to buy my own small boarding house. Sometimes I would think about my mother. I wondered if she was still in that same house, if she ever truly understood what she had done. Once, nearly 10 years after I left, I received another letter. I recognized her handwriting immediately, but this time, I didn't open it. Some wounds heal better when left undisturbed. I never married. For a long time, I couldn't bear the thought of letting anyone close to me. The shadows of my past loomed too large, but I wasn't alone. I had created a family of my own, the women who worked for me, the regular guests who became friends, and later, the young girls who, like me, had nowhere else to go. My boarding house became known as a safe haven for women in need. I never asked questions when a woman showed up at night with fear in her eyes and a child clutching her hand. I simply gave them a room, a meal, and time to figure out their next step. I became the person I had needed all those years ago. In 1978, I received news that my mother had passed away. I sat alone in my office for hours, trying to understand the storm of emotions I felt. Grief, anger, relief, they all swirled together until I couldn't separate one from the other. I didn't attend the funeral. Instead, I planted a small garden behind the boarding house, a place of beauty born from pain. It seemed a fitting memorial. Now, at 76, looking back on my life, I realized that running away was just the beginning. The true journey was learning to live without fear, to trust again, to build something meaningful from the ashes of my childhood. My story isn't just about survival. It's about what comes after. It's about the woman I became because of, and despite, the girl I once was. It's about finding strength in the darkest moments and using that strength not just to save yourself, but to create a light that guides others. If there's one thing I want you to take from my story, it's this: your past may shape you, but it doesn't have to define you. The people who were supposed to protect you may fail, but that doesn't mean you're beyond protection. Sometimes you have to be your own savior first before you can save anyone else. Every woman who has ever stayed at my boarding house brings a different story, but they all share the same truth. We are stronger than we know, braver than we believe, and worthy of a life free from fear. If you were moved by my story, please subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and like this video. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps me share more stories of survival and triumph that might give someone the courage they need today. Until next time, my dear friends, remember that your story isn't over yet, and the next chapter might be the most beautiful one of all.